My daughter-in-law left me waiting for 8 hours at the airport like a fool. Little did she know I had the winning ticket right in my purse. I never thought I'd be capable of saying those words out loud. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. If you also believe that we women still have value, even after 60, type 1 in the comments. And please, leave a like and subscribe. Let's show them we are strong together. My name is Hope Anderson. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Pittsburgh, where the brick houses press against each other like women huddling together in the cold. For over 25 years, I was a mother, a wife, a clerk at the corner pharmacy, the night nurse to my late husband, a baker of birthday cakes for the whole neighborhood, and even the unlicensed therapist for my entire family. I never asked for anything in return. I was content just to see my son Ethan smile when he came over for Sunday dinner, though he was doing that less and less. It was a December morning when my world changed completely. I was sitting in my green velvet armchair, the same one where I'd embroidered tablecloths for years to earn extra money, drinking strong coffee from my favorite mug, the one with a small crack in the handle that I never had the heart to throw away. The weak winter sun streamed through my living room window, illuminating the photos of my son that cover almost the entire wall. Ethan at his first communion, at his high school graduation, on his wedding day with Claire, holding my grandchildren when they were just babies. After being widowed 5 years ago, when my Robert passed and took with him the sound of his footsteps in the house and the scent of the Old Spice he always wore, I dedicated myself even more to my son, to him, his wife Claire, and my 2 grandchildren, Edward and Sophie, whom I've barely seen since they moved to Seattle 3 years ago. Claire got a job out there, they said. A unique opportunity. Once we're settled, we'll bring you out, Mom, Ethan promised me with that smile he inherited from his father. The phone rang that morning with a shrillness that made me jump. I wasn't expecting calls. Hardly anyone calls me anymore, except for Linda from across the street to share neighborhood gossip, or some persistent telemarketer offering cell phone plans I don't need. Hello? I answered, wiping my hands on the apron I still wear, even though I no longer cook for a crowd. Hope, it's so good to hear your voice. Claire's voice sounded so friendly, so warm, that I felt my heart immediately start to race. It had been months since she'd called me directly. It was always Ethan who called, and his calls were getting shorter, more rushed. Claire, honey, what a surprise! My voice trembled with excitement. I settled deeper into my armchair, as if I were about to receive an important guest. How are the kids? How's my Ethan? They're great. Everyone's great. Listen, Hope, there was a pause that made me hold my breath. How would you like to surprise Ethan for Christmas this year? He doesn't know anything about what I'm about to propose. You could fly out to Seattle, and we could pick him up from work together. It would be amazing. I'm sure we'll make him cry. I felt something explode in my chest. A warmth I thought had died when my husband closed his eyes for the last time. Tears welled up as I looked at the photos on the wall, as if they could confirm this was real. Are you sure, honey? I don't want to be a bother. I know you have your life out there, your own way of doing things. My voice broke a little. I've always been afraid of being a burden, of being that meddling mother-in-law from the sitcoms. Not at all, Hope. We're waiting for you with open arms. The kids ask about you all the time. Just wait for me at the airport when you get here. I'll pick you up, and from there we'll go straight to get Ethan. It'll be the perfect surprise. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my house, feeling the walls seem to breathe with me. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to, something that made me feel like I still had a place in this world, that I was still needed by someone. That same afternoon, I walked to Mr. Goldstein's jewelry shop on the corner. I brought with me the small gold ring with a tiny emerald that my mother had given me on my wedding day. So you never forget where you come from, sweetheart, she had said as she placed it on my pinky finger. It was the last thing I had left of her, besides her advice and her secret recipe for apple pie. How much can you give me for this, Mr. Goldstein? I asked, extending my trembling hand. The man, who had known me since I was a girl, frowned. Are you sure, Hope? This ring has a story. I'm sure, I lied, because my heart was tearing apart inside. It's for something important. With the $800 he gave me, I bought the cheapest plane ticket I could find. Then I went to the mall, something I hadn't done in years, and bought a navy blue coat that was on sale. I felt like a teenager getting ready for her first date. I even had my husband's old pocket watch fixed, that gold Omega that Ethan always admired as a child. "Someday this will be yours, son," his dad would tell him as he showed it to him. The days leading up to the trip, I cleaned the house as if the Pope himself were coming to visit. I washed curtains, waxed floors, organized closets. I wanted everything to be perfect for when I returned, because in my heart, I was sure I would come back changed, renewed, with the certainty that I was still important to my family. I imagined Ethan's face when he saw me. I imagined the long hug, the kind he used to give me when he was a boy and had nightmares. I imagined my grandchildren running towards me shouting, "Grandma," like in the movies. I imagined, finally, feeling that after 5 years of loneliness, I still had a place where I belonged. The day of the flight, I woke up before dawn. I showered, did my hair carefully, and put on my nicest dress, the blue one with little flowers I wear to Sunday service, and my new coat. I packed Robert's watch in a special little box, along with some Hershey's chocolates from Pennsylvania for my grandchildren, and a scarf I had knitted during sleepless nights. In the cab to the airport, watching the streets of my city pass by, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement I hadn't experienced since my honeymoon. "Everything's going to be okay," I kept telling myself, clutching my purse as if it held my entire future. I didn't know that. In a way, it did, but not in the way I thought. During the 5-hour flight to Seattle, as I watched the clouds from the window, my mind filled with memories I kept like treasures deep in my heart. I remembered when Ethan was 8 and broke his arm playing soccer at school. I was working double shifts at the pharmacy to pay the tuition for the private school he attended, the same one where the doctors and lawyers' kids from the neighborhood went. "Mommy, it hurts so much," he had told me that night, tears streaming down his cheeks as I spoon-fed him medicine. I stayed up all night, changing the cool cloths on his forehead, praying for his fever to break. Robert was on a business trip, as usual. It was me who carried the weight of everything. The sleepless nights, the medical bills, the worries that ate at my insides until I lost my appetite. When Ethan turned 16, he wanted a mountain bike like his friend Richard's, the son of the owner of the biggest hardware store in town. "All the other moms are getting them for their sons, Mom. I don't want to be the only one without one," he had pleaded with that look that always melted my heart. I cleaned houses on weekends for 4 months. I'd come home with my hands raw, smelling of bleach and pine sol, with a backache that kept me from sleeping well. But when I saw his smile the day I gave him that red and silver bike, I felt every blister on my hands, every sore muscle was worth it. "You're the best mom in the world," he'd said, hugging me so tight he nearly took my breath away. "When I grow up, I'm going to buy you everything you want." Those childhood promises were etched into my soul like invisible tattoos. During his teenage years, when Ethan started dating, I was his accomplice and confidant. I vividly remember the first time he told me about a girl he liked, Monica, the daughter of some prosperous merchants from downtown. He turned as red as a ripe tomato as he told me he wanted to ask her to the movies, but didn't have money for 2 tickets. "Don't you worry, honey," I said, taking a few dollars from my rainy day fund that I'd been saving for new shoes. Mine had worn down heels and the sole was starting to come off, but they could wait. My son's happiness couldn't. When it came time to pay for college, Robert and I took out a second mortgage on the house. It was an expensive engineering program at a prestigious private university in Ohio. "It's an investment in his future," my husband would say as we signed papers we didn't fully understand. "Our boy is going to be someone important in life." All those years, Ethan would come home on weekends with a duffel bag full of dirty laundry and go back with a belly full of my pot roast and a cooler packed with Tupperware containers of food for the week. He never asked for money directly, but he always found subtle ways to let me know he needed it. A comment about how expensive the textbooks were. A complaint about how little his scholarship covered for personal expenses. And I, like an old-school American mom, always found a way to help him. I sold my gold chain, pawned the pearl earrings Robert gave me for our 10th anniversary, and did sewing alterations late into the night. My eyes got so tired I had to start wearing glasses. but every dollar I earned was another brick in my son's future. When he met Claire at the university, I liked her from the start. She was a polite girl from a well-off family in Philadelphia, a business major with very clear plans for her future. She spoke confidently about investments and numbers, things that sounded like a foreign language to me but obviously impressed Ethan immensely. "She's so smart, Mom," my son would tell me, his eyes shining with love. "She's going to help me be successful." During their 3-year courtship, I did my best to win her over. I cooked her favorite dishes when they visited. I gave her a handmade quilt I had inherited from my grandmother, and I listened patiently as she talked about her dreams of one day living on the West Coast. For the wedding, which they wanted in an elegant ballroom downtown, Robert and I took out a loan that would take us 5 years to pay off. "They only get married once," I justified when my sister Connie scolded me for spending so much money on a party. The ceremony was beautiful. Claire looked radiant in a dress that cost more than I earned in 6 months, and Ethan looked like a prince in his rented tuxedo. During the first dance, as I watched them twirl on the dance floor surrounded by elegant guests, I felt a mix of pride and melancholy that I couldn't quite place at the time. When my grandchildren were born, Edward first and then Sophie 2 years later, I became the unofficial full-time grandma. Claire went back to work as soon as her maternity leave ended, so I spent entire days caring for the babies at my house. I changed thousands of diapers, fed them, rocked them to sleep during sleepless nights, and took them to the doctor when they had a fever. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Hope," Claire would say when she arrived, exhausted from work, to pick them up. "You're a blessing to this family." Those words filled my heart with a satisfaction I hadn't felt since Ethan was little. I felt needed again, indispensable. On weekends, when the whole family came for dinner, my kitchen filled with children's laughter, adult conversation, and the noise a happy family makes. I would prepare feasts: pot roast, lasagna, chicken and dumplings, and the 3-layer chocolate cake made from my mother-in-law's recipe. I spent more on those Sunday dinners than on my own food for the entire week. But seeing my family gathered around my table gave me a sense of purpose no money could buy. When Robert died, after a 2-year battle with a cancer that ate him from the inside out like a silent plague, I was left completely alone. The medical bills had drained our savings, the house was still mortgaged, and my pension from the pharmacy was barely enough to get by. Ethan and Claire were very loving during the funeral. They hugged me, comforted me, and stayed with me for the first few nights because I couldn't stand the silence of the house without my husband's snores, without the sound of his slippers shuffling down the hall in the middle of the night. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mom," Ethan had said as we signed papers at the bank. "Let me put my name on your accounts as a co-signer, just in case anything happens. That way you won't have to deal with complicated paperwork if you need help." I signed without reading, trusting him blindly. He was my son, my blood, my reason for living. Why would I ever distrust him? Little by little, the Sunday visits became less frequent. First, they came every other week, then once a month, then only on special occasions. There was always a reason. Claire's job was more demanding, the kids had weekend activities, the city traffic was impossible. When they told me they were moving to Seattle for Claire's job opportunity, I felt like a piece of my soul was being ripped out, but I smiled. I gave them my blessing. I even gave them money for the moving expenses. "It's temporary, Mom," Ethan promised me at the airport, while I held a crying Sophie who didn't understand why she had to leave. "As soon as we're settled, you'll come stay with us." 3 years have passed since that promise. 3 years of increasingly sporadic calls, of rushed video chats where my grandchildren barely recognize me, of Christmases and birthdays celebrated through a cold screen. And now, finally, Claire had called to invite me for Christmas. I was finally going to get my family back. I landed at SeaTac at 12:25 in the afternoon, my heart pounding like a drum. The airport was decorated for Christmas, with golden lights twinkling from the ceiling and carols playing softly over the speakers. Whole families were embracing in the arrivals area. Children ran towards their grandparents, screaming with excitement. Couples kissed as if they'd been separated for years instead of days. And there I stood, with my 2 suitcases full of gifts, trembling not just from excitement, but also from the cold. Seattle in December was chillier than I had imagined. And my new coat, which felt substantial in Pittsburgh, felt like tissue paper against the wind that snuck in through the automatic doors. At 1 p.m. sharp, I sent my first text message. "I'm here, Claire. Terminal 4, arrivals. Where should I meet you?" I added a heart emoji, like the modern daughters-in-law I'd seen on my neighbor's social media. Silence. The read receipt showed up almost immediately, but no reply came. At 2:00 p.m., after I had walked 3 full laps of the arrivals area and memorized every shop and every face of the airport employees, I decided to call her. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and then a cold, automated voice. "The number you have dialed is not in service," or I hung up and dialed again. This time, it didn't even ring. Straight to voicemail. The suitcases started to feel as heavy as if I were carrying river stones instead of gifts. Robert's watch, tucked safely in my handbag, seemed to mock me with every tick-tock that marked the passing minutes. People rushed past me without really seeing me, as if I were part of the airport furniture. Just another statue among the holiday decorations. A janitor, a kind-faced woman who reminded me of my friend Carmen, came by pushing her cart. "Are you all right, ma'am?" she asked with a warm smile. Yes, thank you. I'm just waiting for my family," I lied, trying to sound convincing, though my voice cracked a little on the word family. "Oh, that's nice. It's always good when folks come to pick you up," she smiled warmly before continuing on her way, leaving me even more aware of my solitude. At 3:30 p.m., my legs aching from standing for so long, I sat on one of those uncomfortable metal airport chairs. A young couple sat near me, her head resting on his shoulder while he stroked her hair. They reminded me of Ethan and Claire in their early years, when they'd visit and look so in love, so connected. I took out my phone and dialed Ethan's number. Voicemail again. My heart began to beat in a strange way. Not with excitement, but with something that felt dangerously like panic. "Hi, honey, it's Mom." I left a message, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm here in Seattle at the airport. Claire was supposed to pick me up, but her phone isn't working. I don't know if there was some kind of mix-up. Please call me." At 4 p.m., after 3 cups of watery coffee from a vending machine that cost more than 2 meals back home, I decided I had to do something. I couldn't just stay there forever like an abandoned package. With trembling hands, I called Linda, my lifelong neighbor. She was friends on Facebook with Ryan, an old high school friend of Ethan's who now worked as a travel agent and had been living in Seattle for years. "Hope, what are you doing calling me at this hour? It's 7 o'clock at night here." Linda scolded me with her gravelly voice, a relic of years of smoking unfiltered cigarettes. "Linda, please, I need a huge favor," I begged, and for the first time all day, tears threatened to spill. "I'm in Seattle and my family. I think there's been a mix-up. Could you ask Ryan if he knows where my son lives?" There was a pause that felt like an eternity. "Oh, Hope, what's going on? Didn't they come get you? I can't explain over the phone. Just help me, please." 30 minutes later, Linda texted me an address. Rosewood Chalet, Bellevue. "Ryan says it's a fancy area," she added. "Be careful, Hope." At 6:00 p.m., after waiting for 8 hours like a fool at the airport, I got a taxi. The driver was an older man with a gray mustache who looked at me in the rearview mirror with a mix of curiosity and pity when he saw my eyes, swollen from holding back tears. "First time in Seattle?" he asked as we left the airport and drove into a city that seemed endless under the evening lights. "Yes," was all I could manage. I had no energy to invent stories or explanations. The ride took 40 minutes that felt like an eternity. I watched buildings, parks, and people in thick coats and scarves pass by, all of them with somewhere to go, all with someone waiting for them at home. The meter climbed, a punishment for my naivety, but I no longer cared about the money. I just wanted answers. When we arrived in Bellevue, I realized Ryan was right. It was an expensive area, with large houses and manicured lawns, new cars parked in paved driveways, the kind of neighborhood where successful people live, people who have made it in life. "That's it." The driver pointed to a 2-story house, painted white with stone accents, surrounded by a garden that looked impeccable even in winter. There were several cars parked out front, including a BMW I recognized from photos Claire had posted on social media. I paid the $60 fare, a fortune on my budget, and walked slowly toward the house. I had been on my feet for 8 hours. My feet ached in my Sunday shoes, and the damp Seattle cold chilled me to the bone. But something stronger than exhaustion pushed me forward. The house was completely lit up. From the street, I could see every window glowing with a warm light, and I could hear laughter mixed with Christmas music. It was exactly the kind of family gathering I had imagined having with them. Except I was on the wrong side of the glass. I crept closer to the main window, the one in the living room, and what I saw shattered my soul into pieces so small that even today, months later, I'm still finding sharp fragments cutting me from the inside. There was my Ethan, my son, for whom I had sacrificed everything, wearing a red Christmas sweater, holding a glass of wine, and laughing his head off with a group of people I didn't recognize. Claire looked spectacular in a red dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, her hair perfectly styled, a radiant smile on her face as she chatted with other elegant women. My grandchildren, Edward and Sophie, were on the living room floor, surrounded by a mountain of gifts wrapped in gold and silver paper. Edward, who is 12 now and taller than I remembered, was unwrapping a video game console, while Sophie, my 10-year-old princess, was hugging a new doll almost as big as she was. The dining room table, which I could see partially from where I stood, was set for at least 15 people. There were elegant plates, crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier, and centerpieces with fresh flowers. A perfect Christmas dinner, with all the details a prosperous family can afford, and not a single empty space, not one extra chair, not one place for the grandmother who had sold her mother's ring to be there. I stood on that freezing sidewalk, watching a scene that looked like it was straight out of a Christmas movie, while the December wind cut my face and the tears finally began to fall, unstoppable. It hadn't been a misunderstanding. It hadn't been a communication problem. It had been something much worse. A deliberate, calculated, cruel lie. Claire never had any intention of picking me up from the airport. This perfect family gathering had been planned without me. And the phone call from a week ago had been, what? A joke? A way to keep me away? An experiment to see how far my naivety would go? I backed away from the window slowly, as if in a trance. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want to turn their perfect evening into an awkward drama. I didn't want to be the dramatic mother-in-law who ruins the family party by showing up uninvited. I went back to the taxi, which thankfully was still waiting because the driver had seen my face and understood something was terribly wrong. "Take me to a hotel, please," I told the driver, my voice broken. "Anywhere that's not too expensive." The man, who had introduced himself as Mike when I first got in, looked at me in the rearview mirror with an expression that mixed compassion and experience. He'd seen enough human dramas in his years driving around the city to recognize a family tragedy when one was sitting in his back seat. "Are you sure you don't want me to wait a bit longer? Maybe they're busy and didn't hear the doorbell," he suggested, with the gentleness of a father speaking to his daughter. "No, Mike. I don't want to bother them anymore." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. It's clear they weren't expecting me. He took me to a modest little hotel near the city center, the kind that rents rooms at a rate that doesn't completely destroy a retiree's budget. The receptionist, a young woman with a nose ring, looked at me curiously when I arrived with my suitcases and swollen eyes, but she had the decency not to ask questions. That night, in a small room that smelled of cheap lavender air freshener, I sat by the window overlooking a narrow street full of bars where young people were celebrating Friday night. Their laughter floated up to my room, a reminder that life was going on as normal for everyone but me. I didn't eat. I didn't cry anymore. I couldn't. I just sat there, watching the city lights until dawn, trying to understand how I had ended up here. How the woman who had raised a son with so much love, who had sacrificed everything for his happiness, had ended up being treated like something disposable, like an old piece of furniture that no longer matched the new decor. The next day, Saturday morning, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Mom, where are you? Claire told me you got into Seattle last night, but I don't understand. Weren't you coming for New Year's?" His voice sounded genuinely confused, as if he really knew nothing about what had happened. For a moment, my mother's heart wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the possibility that it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. "Ethan, I arrived yesterday at noon. Claire told me she would wait for me at the airport so we could go surprise you at work. I waited for 8 hours. No one answered my calls. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear voices in the background. Probably Claire and the kids having breakfast in that perfect kitchen I'd seen in her Instagram photos. Mom? There must have been some kind of mix-up. Claire didn't say anything to me about you coming yesterday. She thought it was for the end of the year. A mix-up. My voice hardened in a way that surprised me. Ethan, I went to your house last night. I saw you all through the window. You were having a beautiful family dinner. There was no place for me. Another silence. This one more tense than the last. You went to the house? Mom, you should have rung the doorbell. For what? To interrupt your perfect party? To be the dramatic mother-in-law who shows up uninvited? The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. To beg for scraps of affection after you left me stranded at the airport like a stray dog? Mom, don't exaggerate. It was surely a misunderstanding. Claire can explain. Exaggerate? The laugh that came from my throat sounded bitter even to my own ears. I sold my mother's ring to pay for this trip, Ethan. The ring she gave me on my wedding day. Do you think I'm exaggerating? I heard him mumble something to someone, covering the phone's microphone. Probably Claire, asking what was happening, feigning innocence. Mom, come to the house now. We'll sort this out as a family. No, son. I've already seen everything I needed to see. I hung up before he could reply. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my son. Half an hour later, Claire called. Her voice sounded different, less warm than the week before, with a tone I recognized as the one she used when discussing work or problems she considered minor. Hope, can we talk? I think there's been a terrible confusion. Go on, Claire. I never told you to come yesterday. We talked about the Christmas holidays in general. I thought we agreed you would come for New Year's, when we'd have more time to welcome you properly. She was lying. I knew she was lying because I had every word of that conversation burned into my memory, like a song I'd heard 1,000 times. Claire, you specifically told me we would go surprise Ethan, that we'd pick him up from his job. You told me you would wait for me at the airport. Hope? I never said that. Maybe you misunderstood. I misunderstood. I felt rage begin to grow in my chest like a poisonous weed. I misunderstood when I asked you 3 times if you were sure? I misunderstood when you told me the kids ask about me all the time? The kids do ask about you, but what, Claire? But not enough to include me in their Christmas dinner? But not enough for you to answer the phone when their grandmother is lost in a foreign airport? Her voice became colder, more calculated. This was business Claire talking now, not the affectionate daughter-in-law who had called me last week. Hope, I think you're upset from the trip. Why don't you come to the house and we can discuss this calmly? We can fix this. Fix what, exactly? The fact that you lied to me? Or the fact that you humiliated me? No one lied to you. There was a confusion of dates, that's all. Claire, I saw Ethan's face last night through that window. He looked perfectly happy. He didn't look like someone who was expecting his mother for a Christmas surprise. There was another pause. I could hear voices in the background again, probably Ethan asking how the conversation was going. Hope? I think you're blowing this out of proportion. Come to the house and... No. The word left my mouth with a firmness that astonished me. I am not going to beg for affection where I am clearly not welcome. Of course you're welcome. You're part of the family. Really? Because it didn't feel like it last night. I hung up on that call too. An hour later, I received a text from Edward, my 12-year-old grandson. It was the first time he had written to me directly in months. Grandma, Dad says you're in Seattle. Are you coming to see us? I have a lot to tell you about school. That message broke my heart in a different way. Edward wrote with the genuine innocence of a child who truly wanted to see his grandmother, knowing nothing of the adult drama unfolding around him. I replied, Hi, sweetie. Yes, I'm in Seattle, but plans changed. I love you so much. Why did they change? Can I come see you at the hotel? Before I could answer, another message arrived. This time from Claire. Please do not involve the children in this. This is a problem between adults. That's when I fully understood the situation. Not only had they lied to and humiliated me, but now they were forbidding me from having direct contact with my own grandchildren, as if I were the toxic one, the troublemaker, the one who had created this whole conflict. I wrote to Edward, "The adults have some things to figure out first, my love. But I love you very much, and you'll always be my handsome prince." I didn't write to him again, not wanting to get him in trouble with his parents. On Sunday morning, as I packed my bags to return to Pittsburgh with my heart in pieces, one last message from Ethan arrived. "Mom, please don't leave like this. I know something went wrong, but we're family. Families forgive each other and move on. Come have breakfast with us before you go." I stared at that message for a long time. A part of me, the part that had been a devoted mother my entire life, wanted to run to that house and accept whatever explanation they gave me. I wanted to hug them, forgive them, pretend nothing had happened, just so I wouldn't lose my family. But something new was growing inside me, something I had never felt before. A small but clear voice telling me that I deserved better than crumbs of affection, that I deserved respect, that I deserved to be treated like the woman who had given everything for them. I replied, "Families also respect each other, Ethan. When you're ready to respect me, you'll know where to find me." He didn't answer. I took the flight back that same afternoon, carrying the same suitcases full of gifts that no one had wanted. But I was carrying something else, a painful but liberating clarity about who my family really was, and who had just been an illusion I had clung to for far too long. Back in Pittsburgh, my house greeted me with the same old silence, but something had changed. It was no longer the crushing silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. Like after a storm ends, and you can finally hear your own thoughts, without the noise of the wind destroying everything. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to check my phone for messages from Ethan or Claire. I didn't turn on the TV to fill the void with other people's voices. I poured myself a cup of strong coffee, the kind my mother taught me to make with cinnamon, and sat in my green armchair to think. I took out all the papers I always carry with me from my purse, a widow's habit, afraid something might happen to me, and no one would know where my important documents were. I spread them on the coffee table as if I were playing solitaire, but instead of cards, I had my entire life documented in bills, bank statements, and deeds. There was the deed to the house in the Poconos, the property Robert and I bought when Ethan was 15, thinking we'd have a place for family vacations and where I could one day retire. The house was solely in my name because Robert had insisted, "If anything happens to me, I don't want you to have legal trouble, Hope. Let everything be crystal clear." I also found the statements for my savings accounts, the ones Ethan was a co-signer on, just in case. I reviewed them line by line, transaction by transaction, and what I discovered filled me with a cold rage I had never felt before. Monthly transfers of $500 that I had not authorized, ATM withdrawals in Seattle, purchases from stores I didn't recognize. For the past 2 years since they moved, they had been using my account like a personal ATM. I did a quick calculation. They had taken out over $12,000 without telling me a thing. Money I had saved penny by penny, working extra hours at the pharmacy, doing sewing alterations late at night, selling baked goods on weekends. Robert's watch, which I had taken to Seattle as a gift and brought back undelivered, gleamed in its box on the table. I took it in my hands, and for the first time in years, I didn't think about giving it to Ethan one day. I thought about selling it and using the money for something that would actually make me happy. That same afternoon, I made the first concrete decision of my new life. I walked to the bank as I had done hundreds of times before, but this time I wasn't there to deposit money or check balances. I was there to take control. "I want to remove my son as a co-signer on all my accounts," I told the bank officer, a young woman named Patricia who had helped me for years and knew my whole family story. "Are you sure, Mrs. Anderson? It's a process that, once done, requires both parties to be present to reverse." "Completely sure." Patricia looked at me with curiosity, but had the professionalism not to ask questions. I signed the necessary papers, changed my PINs, and requested a new debit card. In 30 minutes, I had regained full control of my money. When I left the bank, I felt something strange in my chest. Not exactly happiness, but something more subtle. The feeling of doing something for myself for the first time in decades. That night, for the first time since I returned from Seattle, Ethan called. "Mom, what did you do? I can't access the accounts." His voice didn't sound worried about my well-being or curious about how I was processing what had happened. It sounded annoyed, like when he was a teenager and I took away a privilege for misbehaving. I took back my accounts, son. They're mine. But why? I was managing them to help you. Help me how, Ethan? By taking out $500 every month without telling me? By spending my savings in Seattle while I was eating eggs and toast to save money? There was a long silence. I could imagine him in his European-style kitchen, probably with Claire beside him, listening to the conversation and making "I told you so" gestures. Mom, that money, we needed it to get settled. It was temporary. We were going to pay you back when what, Ethan? When you got around to telling me you'd been stealing from me for 2 years? It's not stealing. I'm your son. I was authorized to use those accounts. You were authorized for emergencies, not to live off my savings while treating me like an inconvenience. Another pause. This time I heard voices in the background, Claire saying something I couldn't understand. Mom, you're overreacting because of what happened in Seattle. I understand you felt bad, but Ethan, I interrupted him with a voice I didn't recognize as my own, a firm, clear voice that seemed to come from a woman who had just woken up after years of sleep. I'm not going to argue with you. My accounts are mine. My money is mine. And my respect is also mine. And I'm no longer giving it away for free. What does that mean? It means that when you're ready to treat me like the mother and grandmother I deserve to be, and not like the ATM you've been using, you can call me. In the meantime, I'm going to learn to live for myself. I hung up before he could answer. The next day, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. I didn't have to get up early for work. I didn't have to cook for anyone but myself. I didn't have to worry about family calls that would ruin my day. I made myself a full breakfast, the kind I hadn't had since I was widowed. Scrambled eggs with cheese, bacon, buttered toast, and strong hot coffee. I sat on my small back porch, where I have pots of herbs I had neglected, and ate slowly, savoring every bite. For the first time in years, I wasn't in a hurry for anything. After breakfast, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I got dressed up to go out for no specific reason. I put on my favorite blue dress, applied the coral lipstick Robert used to say made me look 10 years younger, and spritzed perfume on my wrists. I walked through my neighborhood as if I were a tourist in my own life. I greeted neighbors I hadn't seen in months, stopped to chat with Mrs. Carmen at her flower stand, and bought fresh flowers from the market for no other reason than I liked their colors. Celebrating something, Hope? Mr. Roberts, the florist who's known me since I was a child, asked. Yes, I answered truthfully. I'm celebrating waking up. That afternoon, sitting in my living room with the new flowers perfuming the air, I looked at the deed for the Poconos house again. It was a beautiful property, built on a lot overlooking the lake, with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a deck where Robert and I used to have breakfast on weekends. We had rented it out sporadically for extra income, but for the last 2 years, it had been sitting empty because maintaining a house from a distance had become complicated after I was widowed. For the first time, an idea occurred to me that filled me with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. What if, instead of renting the house, I turned it into something more? What if I turned it into a retreat for women like me? That night, I fell asleep earlier and more deeply than I had in months. I didn't dream of reproaches or perfect families seen through cold windows. I dreamed of women laughing in a sunlit kitchen, of deep conversations on a deck overlooking a lake, of the feeling of building something new instead of mourning what I had lost. When I woke up the next day, I was no longer the same woman who had returned, broken, from Seattle. I was someone new, someone who was just beginning to discover what it felt like to live for herself instead of for the love of others. And for the first time in my life, that feeling didn't scare me. It made me curious. A week after taking back my bank accounts, as I was watering the plants on my porch and listening to the birds sing in the oak tree I planted when Ethan was born, my phone rang with a video call. It was Claire, but when I answered, I saw she wasn't alone. The whole family was there. Ethan sitting stiffly on the sofa in their Seattle living room, Edward and Sophie on either side of him looking at the screen with confused faces, and Claire controlling the phone from a chair in front of them. It was obvious they had planned this emotional ambush. The setup was too perfect. too strategic. My grandchildren were there as human shields, a guarantee that I couldn't be too harsh or direct in what I had to say. "Hi, Hope," Claire said with that forced smile she had perfected over years of business meetings. "We want to talk to you, all of us together, as a family." "Grandma," Sophie, my 10-year-old granddaughter, shouted before I could respond. "Why did you leave Seattle without seeing us? Dad said you were here, but you didn't come to the house." My heart clenched at the sight of her worried little face. Her big eyes filled with a confusion she didn't deserve to carry. Edward, being older and more aware of family tensions, remained quiet but attentive. "Sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Sometimes adults have misunderstandings that we need to sort out." Ethan cleared his throat and leaned toward the camera. "Mom, we've been thinking a lot about what happened. I think we all made mistakes. Maybe we didn't communicate well about the dates. Maybe there were different expectations. Maybe?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Ethan, there was no maybe. There was a clear lie and a deliberate humiliation." Claire intervened quickly, her voice adopting that professional tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable and conciliatory. "Hope, we all want this family to work. The kids miss you. We miss you. Can't we just get past this together?" I looked at my grandchildren on the screen. Edward had lowered his gaze, clearly uncomfortable being in the middle of an adult conversation he didn't fully understand. Sophie kept looking at me with those eyes she inherited from her father, full of hope that her grandmother would say yes, that everything would go back to how it was before. "You know what?" I said, getting up from my chair and walking to my bedroom, where I kept the small safe Robert had installed years ago. "I have something to show you." I returned with bank statements in my hand, the ones I had been meticulously reviewing all week. I sat down in front of the camera and held up the papers so everyone could see. "These," I said, pointing to the highlighted lines, "are withdrawals you made from my accounts over the last 2 years. $12,200 to be exact. Money I saved for my medical expenses, for my old age, for emergencies." I saw Ethan's face turn red. Claire tried to maintain her composure, but something flickered behind her eyes, a tension she couldn't completely hide. "Mom, we already talked about that," Ethan began. "No, son. You talked. I listened. Now it's your turn to listen." My voice was strangely calm, as if someone else were speaking through me. "For 30 years of your life, I sacrificed so you could have everything you needed. I sold my jewelry to help pay for your college. I worked late into the night so you wouldn't lack for anything. I looked after your children as if they were my own while you two built your careers." Edward and Sophie were watching us as if we were a movie they didn't quite understand, but were mesmerized by the intensity of the emotions unfolding before them. "And when I was left alone, when I needed you most, you moved to the other side of the country. And not content with that, you helped yourselves to my money as if it were an early inheritance. Mom, we never thought of it as stealing." Ethan looked genuinely distressed. "We always planned to pay it back when—" "When what?" I interrupted. "When you didn't need it anymore? When I was already dead and couldn't ask for it back?" Claire finally intervened, her mask of cordiality falling away completely. "Hope, I think you're taking this too far. We're a family. Families help each other." "You're right, Claire. Families do help each other." I stood up and walked to the wall where all the photos of Ethan were, from childhood to adulthood. I took down the largest one, the one of the 3 of us at his college graduation, me hugging him with pride as he held his diploma. But they also respect each other. They communicate. They include each other. I returned to the camera, holding the photo. "Do you know what I've realized these past few days?" I continued, looking directly at the camera. "That I've been buying love for years. Buying your affection with money, Ethan. Buying my place in this family with sacrifices that you took as if they were my obligations. Not gifts." I took the photo in my hands and tore it in half, slowly, deliberately. The sound of the paper ripping was clear through the microphone. "Mom!" Ethan shouted, jumping up from the sofa. "What are you doing?" "I'm freeing myself," I answered with a calmness that surprised even me. "I'm freeing myself from the illusion that if I just gave everything I had, you would give me a place in your lives." Claire grabbed the phone, bringing it close to her face. "Hope, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child throwing a tantrum. The children are watching this." "Exactly. I said, looking directly at Edward and Sophie. I want them to see what it looks like when a woman stands up for herself. I want them to see that real love isn't begged for, bought, or pleaded for. I spoke directly to my grandchildren. Kids, I love your father more than words can say, and I love you both with my whole soul. But sometimes, when the people we love hurt us, we have to protect our own hearts until they learn how to value us. Are you not going to love us anymore? Sophie asked, her eyes filling with tears. I will always love you, my angel, but I will no longer accept being treated poorly just for the privilege of being near you. Ethan sat back down, looking defeated. Mom, what do you want us to do? How do we fix this? I don't want you to do anything, son. I want you to reflect. I want you to understand that a mother is not an ATM, that a grandmother is not a free housekeeper, that a 68-year-old woman deserves to be treated with dignity, not like an old piece of furniture you can store in the basement until you need it. Claire had adopted a more calculating expression. So what are you going to do? Cut us off completely? Punish us for a misunderstanding? I'm not going to punish you, I said, feeling a strange peace settle over me. I'm going to respect you enough to believe you are capable of understanding your mistakes and correcting them. And I'm going to respect myself enough not to beg for crumbs of affection where I once provided feasts of love. I moved closer to the camera, wanting them to see my face clearly. When you are ready to include me in your lives as the mother and grandmother that I am, and not as the benefactor that you need, you will know where to find me. Until then, I am going to learn to be happy on my own. What does that mean exactly? Ethan asked. It means I'm going to live for myself for the first time in 68 years. I'm going to do things that bring me joy, not you. I'm going to spend my money on things that make me happy, not on buying a place in a family that sees me as optional. Sophie began to cry openly. Edward put his arm around her, and for a moment, my resolve wavered. Seeing them sad broke my soul. But I knew that if I gave in now, I would be teaching them that women must accept any treatment just to avoid losing the people they love. I love you, I said as a farewell. And that is exactly why I will no longer allow you to treat me as if I am worthless. I ended the video call before they could answer. I sat in my living room in silence for a long time after that, feeling something I took a moment to recognize. For the first time in decades, I felt free. 3 days after that life-changing video call, I woke up with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't sadness or regret, as I might have expected. It was something I hadn't felt in years, curiosity about the day ahead. I got up without rushing, made my coffee with extra cinnamon, and for the first time since returning from Seattle, I turned on the radio. A Patsy Cline song my mother used to sing while cooking was playing. Crazy. Instead of making me melancholy, I found myself humming along. After breakfast, I did something I hadn't done in over 20 years. I took Robert's old atlas from the bookshelf and opened it on the kitchen table. For years, that book had gathered dust while I lived my life within a 20-mile radius of my house. Always available, always waiting, always in the same place in case my family needed me. I ran my fingers over the maps as if they were magical territories waiting to be discovered. Santa Fe, with its art markets and food I'd only ever tasted in expensive restaurants in Pittsburgh. New England, with its coastal towns and history I'd always wanted to visit. The Carolinas, with their historic cities and charm that I'd seen in the documentaries I watched on Sunday afternoons. Why not? I said out loud, surprising myself. Why the hell not? That same afternoon, I walked to the travel agency in the mall, the one I always saw from a distance when I ran errands but had never thought to enter. The young woman behind the counter, about 25 with pink hair and a genuine smile, greeted me as if she'd been waiting for me her whole life. How can I help you, ma'am? I want to take a trip, I said, and the words sounded so strange in my mouth I almost laughed. A trip by myself, to places I've never seen. Her eyes lit up. How exciting! Do you have a destination in mind? For the next hour, Alexandra, that was the girl's name, showed me photos of places that took my breath away. She told me about special tours for senior women, hotels with included spas, and cultural excursions where I could learn about Native American history and traditional crafts. Look, she said, showing me a colorful brochure. This tour of New Mexico includes a visit to Santa Fe, the Taos Pueblo, and the stunning landscapes of Georgia O'Keeffe country. It's 2 full weeks, all inclusive. And look at this. She pointed to a photo of smiling older women in an artisan market. Last month's group had an amazing time. I left the agency with a ticket for January 15th, and a feeling in my stomach I took a moment to recognize. It was pure excitement, the same kind I felt as a little girl when my dad would promise to take us to the county fair. That night, I called my niece, Julia, the only family member who had kept in touch with me without asking for anything in return. Julia is a CPA, 42 years old, with 2 teenage sons and the practical wisdom she inherited from her mother, my sister Connie. Aunt Hope, it's so good to hear from you. How are you? Better than I've been in years, honey. And I have a proposal for you. I told her about the house in the Poconos, about my idea to turn it into something more than an occasional rental property. I told her about my vision of creating a space where women like me could find refuge and community when their families had written them off. A refuge? Julia asked with genuine curiosity. More than that, a place where older women can rediscover themselves, where they can learn new things, have deep conversations, and feel valued for who they are, not for what they can give to others. Julia was quiet for a moment. Aunt Hope, that sounds beautiful, but do you have any idea what that would entail legally? The permits, the taxes, the administration? That's why I'm calling you, sweetheart. You know about numbers and paperwork. I know about broken hearts that need healing. That conversation lasted for 2 hours. Julia helped me research the options. We could create a nonprofit, apply for state grants for social projects, and establish a mixed funding model of private donations and affordable fees. The first thing we need is a name, Julia said toward the end of the call. Without hesitating, I replied, the Lucy Anderson Center, after my mother. Perfect. She would be so proud, Aunt Hope. The following days were a whirlwind of activity I hadn't experienced in years. Julia came down from Cleveland with a laptop full of documents, forms, and business plans. We worked at my kitchen table like conspirators planning a quiet revolution. We decided to start small. The Poconos house could comfortably accommodate 6 women. We could offer stays of 1 to 3 months, enough time for them to process their family crises and develop plans for their new lives. And what will they do there besides stay? Julia asked, typing notes on her computer. They're going to learn to live for themselves, I answered with a conviction that surprised me. Personal finance workshops, so they never again have to depend financially on ungrateful children. Cooking classes for one, because many of us have spent decades cooking for entire families and don't know how to feed ourselves well when we're alone. Conversation circles where they can talk about their postponed dreams without anyone judging them. Julia smiled. Aunt Hope, I think you've just described something that a lot of women desperately need. A week later, we auctioned Robert's watch. It was harder than I expected, but when I saw the check for $2,000, I knew he would have approved. That money became the seed money for the Lucy Anderson Center. Julia handled all the legal paperwork while I got the house ready. I hired Mr. Miller, a local handyman I'd known for years, to make some necessary repairs. I painted the bedrooms in cheerful colors: sunflower yellow, sky blue, mint green. I bought new twin-sized beds, because the women arriving there would need to learn to take up their own space without apologizing for it. During those weeks of preparation, I didn't receive a single call from Seattle. At first, I checked my phone compulsively, hoping Ethan would call to apologize, to tell me they'd reflected on things, that they wanted to fix our relationship. But gradually, that anxiety began to fade. One afternoon, as I was organizing the small library I'd decided to include in the common room, self-help books, romance novels, biographies of brave women, I realized I was no longer waiting for the phone to ring. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't defining my happiness by the attention others gave me. The day before I left for New Mexico, I received my first application for the center. It was from a woman named Rose, 62, from Scranton. Her daughter had pushed her out of her own home to sell it and split the money with her siblings, promising that they would all take care of her. After 6 months of living like a burden in her children's houses, rotating each month like an awkward piece of furniture, She had found information about our project in a Facebook group for older women. "I just need a place where I'm not made to feel guilty for existing," she wrote in her letter. "A place where I can remember who I was before I became the on-call grandma." I cried when I read those words. I cried because I knew exactly what Rose was feeling, and I cried with joy because I now had something concrete to offer her. I replied immediately, "Rose, we are waiting for you with open arms. Here, you will remember not only who you were, but who you can still become." That night, packing my suitcase for my trip, I looked at myself in the closet mirror. The woman looking back was not the same one who had returned, broken, from Seattle 2 months ago. This woman had bright eyes, straight shoulders, and something in her smile that suggested beautiful secrets held in her heart. For the first time in 68 years, I was going to wake up tomorrow not knowing exactly what to expect from the day. And that uncertainty, instead of scaring me, thrilled me to my core. 6 months after my return from New Mexico, where I learned to weave with Pueblo women who taught me that wisdom has no age and that every wrinkle tells a story of resilience, I am sitting on the deck of the house in the Poconos, watching the sunset paint the lake orange. Beside me, Rose is knitting a blue scarf while she tells me about the letter she received yesterday from her youngest daughter, asking for forgiveness and a chance to rebuild their relationship. "Are you going to answer her?" I ask, pouring chamomile tea into the clay mugs we bought together at the town market. "I don't know yet," she replies with the tranquility she has developed during her 3 months here. For the first time in my life, I don't feel a rush to forgive. I don't feel that urgency to run and fix things just to avoid being alone. Rose is one of the 6 women currently living at the Lucy Anderson Center. She arrived broken, feeling invisible, convinced that her only function in life was to be useful to others. Today, she knits with steady hands and talks about plans to open a small craft shop back in Scranton, financed with the savings she recovered after Julia helped her review the accounts her children were managing for her own good. On the wrought iron table in front of us are letters from women all over the country. The center has become something bigger than I ever imagined. A feature story in a national magazine about older women abandoned by their families mentioned our project, and since then, we haven't stopped receiving applications, donations, and offers of help. Carmen, 58, arrived after her daughter-in-law kicked her out of the house she had paid for, telling her that 2 women in the same kitchen never works. Now, Carmen is taking online business administration classes and plans to open a food truck specializing in Cajun cooking. Beatrice, 65, came after discovering her 3 children had been planning to put her in a nursing home to get their hands on her house in Philadelphia. Now Beatrice paints watercolors that she sells at a local gallery and says she's never been happier. Mary Ellen, 61, escaped a house where her adult children treated her like a free maid, full-time nanny, and personal ATM. Here, she discovered she has a talent for writing and is working on a book about women who found their freedom after 60. Each of them arrived convinced their best years were behind them, that their value as people had expired the day they were no longer absolutely indispensable to others. Each of them will leave knowing their story is just beginning. Julia manages the administrative side from Cleveland, visiting every other week to oversee the finances and coordinate the workshops. We've established partnerships with local colleges that send social work and psychology students to do their internships with us. We also collaborate with the county's social services to identify cases of older women in situations of family neglect. The success of the center has attracted media attention. Last week, a crew from a major morning show came to film a documentary about what they called the empowered grandma phenomenon. I don't much care for the label, but if it helps more women know they have options, I'll accept any name they want to give us. What fills me with the most pride isn't the interviews or the accolades. It's sitting here each evening and hearing the laughter coming from the kitchen, where women who arrived broken are learning to cook for one without feeling guilty about it. It's seeing them get dressed up to go for a walk into town, not because someone is coming to visit, but because they deserve to look nice for themselves. It's witnessing the deep conversations they have in the living room at night, where they talk about dreams they kept locked in the basement of their hearts for decades, waiting for the right moment that never came because they were too busy living for others. My phone, which is on the table next to the letters, buzzes with a message. It's from Edward, my grandson. Over these months, he has been the only one in my immediate family who has kept in touch, sending me sporadic messages about school, his friends, little things from his daily life that he shares without his parents' mediation. Grandma, I saw the article about your project online. My classmates say you're famous. I'm proud of you. Can I come visit you during summer vacation? I smile as I read his words. Edward is 13 now, old enough to understand that family relationships are complicated and that true love doesn't require one person to erase themselves to please others. I text back, "Of course you can come, my prince. I'll teach you how to weave and tell you stories about brave women. But you'll have to help in the kitchen and learn to make your own bed, because here, everyone contributes equally." Rose looks at me curiously. Was that your grandson? Yes. The only one who understood that a grandmother who respects herself is a better role model than a grandmother who sacrifices herself until she disappears. I haven't heard anything directly from Ethan and Claire in these 6 months. I know from Edward's messages that they've continued living their life in Seattle as if I never existed. At first, that knowledge hurt. Now it feels irrelevant. Not because I've stopped loving them, but because I've learned the difference between loving someone and being emotionally dependent on them. One of the most liberating things I've discovered is that I can love my son and daughter-in-law without needing them to love me back in the way I expect. I can send them good wishes from a distance without sacrificing my dignity on the altar of their indifference. Julia arrived yesterday to go over the center's finances and brought interesting news. The state of Pennsylvania wants to replicate our model in other cities. They've offered us funding to open 3 more centers, one near Harrisburg, another in the Laurel Highlands, and a third in Lancaster County. Aunt Hope, she told me last night as we reviewed the numbers in the living room. What started as your way of healing has turned into a social movement. There are women from Canada and even the UK asking how they can create something similar in their countries. I never intended to create a movement, I told her. I just wanted to create a place where women like me could remember that we are valuable on our own. Maybe that's exactly why it worked, she said with that intelligent smile she inherited from her mother. This morning, while having breakfast in the kitchen with my 5 housemates, Mary Ellen read aloud a letter she had written for a chapter in her book. It said, "For 60 years, I believed my worth depended on how much I could give to others. Here, I learned that my worth is inherent, that I don't have to earn it, that I don't have to prove it, that it simply belongs to me by virtue of existing." We all applauded when she finished. It wasn't just a personal reflection. It was the manifesto of all of us. Now, as the sun sets behind the mountains and Rose packs away her knitting, I think about everything that has changed in my life. The woman who sold her mother's ring to beg for affection in Seattle no longer exists. In her place is a woman who wears new earrings bought with money she earned giving talks on female dignity, who sleeps in a twin bed without apologizing for taking up space, who eats breakfast when she's hungry and not when others need to be fed. A new woman is arriving at the center tomorrow. Her name is Patricia. She's 59. And in her application letter she wrote, "My children told me I was selfish for wanting to keep my house instead of selling it to them. I need a place where being selfish isn't a sin, where taking care of myself is a virtue." I have the yellow room ready for her. The one that looks out onto the garden where the bougainvillea bloom without asking anyone for permission. Have you experienced something similar? Do you know someone who has sacrificed so much that they forgot about themselves? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone else who needs to hear it. Because we all deserve to remember that it's never too late to start living for ourselves.